And so today I'll talk just a little bit about the proposed FY26 budget that you have in front of you, kind of from a very high level. So talk a little bit about revenues and expenditures, those top line numbers, and then talk about kind of some new initiatives, of which there are relatively few. Brad has a little bit of information about our calendar that he'll mention right after this. And then Dexter, in his role as Mayor Pro Tem, will sort of gather input and sort of assemble questions we have that could be routed to staff for our next meeting. Good, everybody? All right, so as noted in the letter that's at the top of the budget, this is probably what I would describe as the most stable budget of the 19 that I've been involved in Athens-Clarke County. I've lived through the economic downturn of 2008, 2012. I certainly remember some of those years being really challenging. And we got to the point where revenue had declined because property values had declined and people's personal retail spending had declined. And we had some really tough years where we had to cut $4,000 after school programs and $8,000 summer camps. And we had to go through the really difficult exercise of cutting more than 100 streetlights from the community. And this is not that challenging a year. And I'm really glad for that. But certainly the headwinds are uncertain. Don't know what the economy is going to be looking like over the next year, whether it comes with questions about those individuals who've gotten laid off of positions or things that you hear about on the news every day, like the impact of prospective tariffs. And we also don't know what the coming federal budget is going to look like. Certainly the proposed federal budget eliminates some of the funds that we've currently received and passed along to communities, like community development block grant funds and HUD HOME funds. So all that to be said, what I went into this budget not wanting to do is eat as much into prior year fund balance as we've seen before. So you'll see in the B section, I only use about $700,000 of prior year fund balance. In the past, we've used several $1 million some years, but I wanted to be really cautious going in. And so you can see that this in the general fund has about $201 million of expenditures. And then all funds total, capital dollars, SPLOST, utility funds, about $350 million total, just shy of $350 million total. As previewed in the Big Rocks meeting, we are kind of holding harmless employees when it comes to healthcare benefits. For another year, it had been a goal of ours to really make sure that when we increased salaries for employees, that was perceived and felt as a real increase, not something that would be clawed back because we're then asking for more money for healthcare costs. So we're not asking for additional money for healthcare costs for employees. And because our staff has done a really good job of managing credits within the healthcare system, we're not having to even draw any more money from the general fund for that. This recommended budget does have a 3% pay table increase for standard staff, along with a 4% market increase for current employees that are in the unified pay. And similarly, a 3% pay table increase for public safety folks. And then they, as they advance through the years, are part of a pay table where they step up sort of much the same way that folks in public education kind of move up from there through about a $740,000 component of this budget just to fund those step increases. In terms of new activities, of which there are a few, we're in a position where, of course, there's so much more that's happening online that used to happen through software. And so cybersecurity is ever more a concern. And so there's a new assistant director position in IT and information technology. And so that's about a $60,000 expenditure. Within public utilities, there are 2 additional positions to assist with project development and equipment maintenance. And of course, that comes from the public utilities fund, not from the general fund. We have put about $90,000 more in TPW for increased cost of streetlight electricity. You mentioned that a minute ago. There's about $50,000 additional funding for insurance processing fees through solid waste. You probably get the same emails I do, kind of asking, hey, can you handle my battery? Can you handle my laptop? And it just costs some money for those to be cycled through the system and broken down and then ultimately found a recycling center. We, of course, initiated the Real-Time Crime Center this year. There are 2 crime analysts in the police department who already are attached to that, and there's a 3rd position added here. We've been on a multi-year path to increase our capacity within the Fire and Emergency Management Department. And so we're kind of in year 3 of upgrades there. And so 3 final positions in that long intended array would be introduced mid-year for a total cost of about $220,000 to the general fund. Within fire, but drawing from the building inspections fund, is a new fire marshal to help with plans review. Because of course, that's one of the staff people who has to look at every new built thing to say, hey, is this safe? And is it going to come out of the ground in a way that's going to be successful in here in the long term? And then in the sheriff's budget, there's $177,000 for medical services for in-custody folks. I've added a position to probate court for a 2nd judge. Probate Judge Schaefer has been asking for this for several years because there's just greater volume and there's quite a backlog. So more people have estates that need to be managed, and that has to be managed through probate court. And so we want to make sure that we're really kind of following all of those state dictates, and this is going to allow that. There's $120,000 additional in the district attorney's budget. And that is, at least in part, responsive to some lost positions because grant funds weren't applied for last year. And then finally, $41,000 for an additional elections assistant in the elections office for 6 months. As you know, just kind of reading the news and seeing what's going on, there is ever more compliance that has to happen in elections. We want to make sure we're responsive to that need. Where we'll be next year, I think that's a good question, but going into some period of uncertainty, as I noted, I didn't want to really make major modifications. Millage rate remains flat at 12.45. So that's basically the big high level overview. Brad's going to make a couple of points just about our calendar based on some software things that have impacted every jurisdiction across the state of Georgia. And then Dexter will be able to gather some feedback and interest areas with folks.
Thank you, Mayor. And when I start off, all this I will email to you tomorrow morning too. But with the House bills that were adopted last year and then amended this year, the state system, the state software that everybody uses to do their final assessments had some glitches, had some challenges. Which has kind of put us behind. We were ready. All of our information was ready to go. We were waiting on the software solution, which has now happened. So we are in a position now. I think the Board of Assessors met tonight or are meeting tonight. The plan is that those assessment notices will be sent in the morning to the vendor that prints and mails them. So everybody should receive assessment notices next week. It's a little later than we normally do it. And from a scheduling standpoint, where that puts us with regard to the process and the taxpayer bill of rights meetings is it looks like it'll put us about a week potentially behind where we would like to be. The first scheduled taxpayer bill of rights hearing be at your June 3rd voting meeting. It doesn't mean you can't still adopt your budget on that June 3rd meeting. You just can't adopt the millage rate until you've gone through those 3 TBOR meetings. Right now, it looks like the 3rd and final meeting would be at a special call session on June 17th. I believe we already have a meeting scheduled for that day. So that's where we would slot it. So it puts us just a little bit behind, but nothing is not as bad as we feared that it would be. We would have had issues with that state software that could not have been fixed in a timely manner. So it's done. We have done what we need to do, and those assessment notices will go out. You should receive them next week, and I'll email this to you all in writing.
You said 3, right? So
There were the T-board meetings. The first one would be tentatively scheduled for the 3rd of June, which is our voting meeting in June. Second hearing would be on the 5th of June at a special call meeting. And then the 3rd and final hearing special call meeting on June 17th.
Would they have,
What time that would be?
We haven't, I don't think we've set times yet, but I would assume the standard 6 o'clock that you normally meet.
Are these meetings where people come and talk about their budget? About the millage.
About the
I know, but voting on that on the first of those meetings, and it just seems a little, it's not a good view.
Now, if we want to do additional public input that's not TBOR, in those technical terms, we certainly can do that.
is there a reason why we wouldn't wait till the 17th just to vote on the budget?
Yeah.
Because I agree with Carol. I think it's a bad look. Let's have those taxpayer bill of rights and then vote on a budget before we listen to all those taxpayers.
Yeah, they're not, people are not going to understand that, and it's just too hard to respond to.
And we can have other, people can come speak beforehand, but we know that when these go out, it's gonna get attention and people are going to speak. So I'd be for.
It's a huge ripple for staff, isn't it?
It is, yes. So the longer we wait on adopting the budget, the shorter timeframe our staff has to get everything ready for July 1st for the budget to be effective. And I will say, so you don't technically have to adopt the millage rate in conjunction with the budget, but I understand what I hear you saying, which is the public is used to these 3 TBORs in order to speak to the budget. We are still required to have a public hearing for the budget adoption. As of now, that's scheduled for May 20th at your agenda setting session. I don't know if Joseph or Tim, if y'all have anything to add related to the budget adoption versus millage, just to add for consideration.
I think you covered it. Well, I guess my point, and I think others may be, as well as, there may be people wanting to come to us to lower the millage rate or to raise it one or the other. That's have an impact on what we would pass as a budget. So I don't see any other way around it, to just delay the vote. I'm sorry that may create some situations, but the situation's been created for us from the state.
Right. One of the things that we could do, because we had moved it to the 17th because you had a meeting scheduled already for millage rate.
Right.
Technically, we can get that third taxpayer bill of rights meeting on a special call meeting on the 10th instead of the 17th, which would give us an extra week.
Sure.
Be an extra meeting for you all to adopt the budget. But the one thing, we can't back these T-board meetings up anymore under the way
Oh, I know you
public
can.
notice.
So June, that's the earliest we can have it, though, right?
That's the earliest we could have it and adopt it if you wanted to adopt the budget with the third taxpayer bill of rights meeting would be on the 10th.
You couldn't start like the first taxpayer bill of rights, you couldn't have it before June 3rd. Okay, so there's a time frame between when they're mailed out.
Yes.
Yeah.
There'll be more explanation in the full email that I send out to you tomorrow, but if you would be willing to consider a June 10th special call meeting to adopt the budget in that third meeting, that would give us an extra week.
I think that's kind of appropriate, and it also allows us to have
Sure.
a broader discussion about the budget at that time, if it be with nothing else on that agenda.
Well,
The public needs to be made aware of what we're doing and that we'll be totally transparent with everything that we're doing. So I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, the 10th sounds like a good move there. And then, because we have 40 items on the June 3rd budget.
closer to 50 now.
So there's another reason why the budget, happening then is we're gonna be brain dead.
So
So
that was my.
Thumbs up.
Have we gotten any updates on, and maybe they're gonna do this tonight, the digest? There's always some updates on the digest right around budget time, or whatever.
So the assessment values got voted on and approved by the Board of Assessors today. So shortly, right before we came
Is
to
it,
this meeting.
is it different than what's in here?
So projection wise, I think we're gonna have to look to compare those values, just because we tend to, once those valuations are set in stone by the Board of Assessors, usually there's a little bit of time there where we can kind of look at what our projections are, but we tend to lean a little bit more conservative on our early projections. So I would argue that we're usually around correct on projections versus what the valuations are. But I would say we probably need a couple, like at least a week to try to review and get more information.
Well, I remember last year it was a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
$2 million more than what was in the.
We usually err on the side of caution and try to conservatively project, and then occasionally when village and rate valuations and assessment valuations come out, we'll get more.
So you think within
But
a
we'll
week,
see.
we'll have the final number?
Yeah, we're getting the thumbs up. And staff is good with the moving the vote for the budget to June 10th.
I have a question. Since part of the new stuff that's making it delayed is the 3% cap on assessment increase, does that mean we don't have to consider the appeals process as much as is typical with a huge jump?
You're still gonna get appeals. We have in the last couple of years had around 200 appeals in any given year. And you can imagine that, right? Because values have gone up very
Right.
significantly. So I don't know that it'll take away assessment, appeals, but we won't know until it's implemented, so.
But it would still be a smaller amount, right? Because of
No,
the
because
amount.
if I remember, the school district did not opt in to the state bill. So if you appeal, you're still moving a portion of your tax bill independent of Athens-Clarke County.
Forgot about that part. You're right. Okay, so there's that part that we'll see without the cap. Well, this is gonna be, no wonder it took so long, right? Because of the two parts
No,
for us.
they had to get the software
The software was the issue.
to
Yeah.
process it appropriately.
Yeah,
So how does this impact with the school board, budget? I know they're still going, did they get held up also because of the glitch?
I would assume.
I would assume. I haven't heard directly from the school district, but they're in the same, obviously, the information that the tax assessor's office has for us is the same for the school district. So my understanding is that everyone's impacted.
I think everybody in the state is being
Yeah.
impacted.
And their natural budget approval date would be June. I don't know if they're going to stick with that or not for meeting today.
in that space.
So the June 3rd voting meeting is not going to be the first taxpayer bill of rights, or it is?
It is.
We're going to tack that on top of the 50 items.
That was already there.
It would have been there normally.
It's been there.
Should have been the third instead of the first.
It's obsolete.
It's at the very beginning. Yes.
Are the 50 items on consent?
That's up
That's
to
up to
you.
y'all. Agenda set.
Is there,
It really sounds like it's up to y'all, sending us 50.
Actually, a lot of it is, we get the agenda set in on Tuesday, and a lot of it is, department stuff. We
Right.
move 4 things forward, June 3rd, so some of it, much of it is planning stuff. So a lot of stuff I think we can get through fairly quickly. I think our biggest discussion will be on the planning. That's all I'm saying. That could be most of our conversation.
so we'll have June 3rd, and then we won't meet on the 5th, or we will?
We won't meet on the fifth.
And then we meet on June 10th.
No,
The bid for number 2.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, the second taxpayer bill right meeting under special call will be on the 5th. And then the third would be on the 10th.
And the 5th is already.
On June 5th. June 5th, we were anticipating the budget already being adopted at that point, so that will be an additional meeting. So probably
That'll be new.
But May 20th is also announced somehow as a budget,
Budget,
public hearing on the
public
budget.
hearing on the budget.
yes.
And that's normally scheduled agenda setting session date, so.
And that's the 20th, which is,
Agenda setting Tuesday.
Back to the 50 item.
oh,
So we still have something on May 15th, budget hearing, or budget meeting,
We got 13. I'm sorry, 15,
15th, that Thursday,
20th.
and the 20th.
unless we whip it out.
Just say it.
13th, the 15th, and if needed, the 22nd.
And if needed, the 22nd. Thank you.
Yes.
Handout.
Right.
Get your hand out.
We will send all that out in writing.
15.
Can I need to ask a question. So do we have to vote on the budget on the 3rd? Can we?
No, but wait,
You can move it to the 10th and vote on it in conjunction with your third taxpayer bill of rights meeting.
Okay.
So we're still gonna have the budget stuff scheduled, even though we're not getting the public input until after, right? The meetings that are on the, I don't have that agenda printed out.
13th, 15th.
13 and 15 next week.
Without public input. I'm just wondering if,
We certainly have public input at those
it
meetings.
seems like we should be moving also these meetings, we should wrap up, have our shrimp, go home. No, I'm just kidding. But it seems to me like the three meetings that are on the agenda tonight, calendar listed on that, we should be moving those too.
There's only 7 days between the 3rd and the 10th. So I mean, for us to figure things out, between June 3rd and 10th. So,
It seems like at least one of them should be after we've had.
And again, we can have public input on the 13th and 15th. And then potentially 22nd.
So we usually have at least one that is before public input. I think the concern from staff is, we've just got to make sure y'all are having enough conversations to where you feel comfortable preparing to adopt that budget. And so if you want to add public input, we're welcome to. If there is, one that needs to shift, maybe that's appropriate. But I think the concern is just to make sure that y'all have enough time talking to each other to where you feel comfortable moving forward when that public input is there.
is there anything else on the agenda, June 5th? The public hearing, right?
June 5th, it would be a special call, so it'd only be this item.
Right, so we would have opportunity to talk as a group on that time because we have nothing else on the agenda.
Tim?
On the fifth, yeah.
I believe last year you had maybe 3 of the 4 budget meetings before there was any public input.
Okay.
So it's not unusual.
Okay. It just seems like it. So thanks for that.
So Tuesday, May 13th, next Tuesday, do we still have a work session at noon?
We do, yes.
You got 10 a.m.
That would be
Yeah.
a good day for us to not have a
Yeah.
budget meeting.
That's what, I mean,
And then pick up on the May 22nd, maybe one.
I can't be here for the work session at lunch that day. 'Cause we got that, yeah, we have a 10 a.m., but we got, then be back at 5:30, realistically, do all that.
Just for clarification, is that the constitutional officer budget? review?
It's Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesdays.
May 30th,
Yeah.
How about-
Judges, DA.
that night.
And John,
That'd be
you
a-
on that.
Okay, then move on, reschedule.
We can't change that. Right, because it's already.
But you would be rescheduling the constitutional officers are next Tuesday
Yeah, then the next one,
night.
Yeah.
so Thursday, the 15th. Want to move that to May 22nd.
I'm hearing, Brenda.
Wait a minute, what are you saying?
Yes.
What are you saying?
I was suggesting that since public input is not happening in the order of the dates being plotted, that next Thursday, the 15th, our budget meeting could be postponed and we pick up on the 22nd because we would have had public input on May 20. But more information that contradicts that,
Be there, so
or which one?
the 22nd or the 20th.
We've already.
Oh, okay.
And I think Brad has some additional
Yeah.
information.
Tim's just advised me that we've already advertised for these meetings to be held. So especially the one next Tuesday, given that we're on Thursday already, would be extremely difficult in conjunction with the circulation of our local paper to get noticed.
All right, well, enough said. That's,
Tuesday's just going to be a really long day for you all between the work session and this meeting. I hate to say it, but
and there'd be food though,
There will be.
maybe some extra caffeine. Anyway, just a thought.
Trying to make sure it's a party.
Thank you.
So is everybody clear on the dates?
We're just adding, no
And
subtraction.
Brad will send out a
we'll send out something that, yes.
Well, and just thank y'all for your flexibility on this. I know it's not ideal. It's not ideal for the staff either. We've been really trying hard, but it's just unfortunately the nature of trying to implement legislation with short time frames. Sometimes this happens. I appreciate this dialogue.
And we're not alone. Every municipality.
Everyone.
59 counties,
And from what-
530 cities.
From what I understand, a lot of them in were shaped, because we went ahead and prepared and got everything to a point where we had to stop. So we were ready as soon as the glitch was resolved, that we could go ahead and plug and go. I think some municipalities opted to wait. And so now they're really scrambling.
Okay.
Okay. Good. So, thank you all for gathering, this evening. Do want to give everybody, an opportunity. I know we just got the budget, but if you got any, questions, anything you want to think, you gotta take out, please, stress that. Everybody has an opportunity to speak. I do, I just start first. I do, want to think about, making sure that we try to, fund our, real-time crime center. All right, we have 3 positions. I spoke with the chief and we need to make sure that we fund that fully for what he recommended. So take a look at that. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I just wanted to share that that was one of my questions for more information. If we could have the original ask sent to us so that we can have that written information as we compare. So it's in the book.
The ask was $419,000.
Well, they can email it to me.
Okay. Well,
Get it out, all
your information.
Yeah.
It's there.
Because we're getting emails, I want to compare what I'm hearing with what was actually asked.
Would you do this for me? Like I said, everybody have opportunity, so
Yeah.
let me finish and then I'll go around the
Okay.
room, let everybody speak.
Okay, thanks.
Looking at trying to fund a real crime center. I think a couple other things that, we're looking at again, we don't know, and I know Commissioner Hammond mentioned that we may have more than, when we get our tax digest, there may be a little bit more money in there, so we need to make sure that, one thing I do want to do, we go back and forth, and we kicked this around last year, that we look at, starting salaries for the sheriff's department. I know we're doing a, study right now, but I know we put money aside to do that. So again, I want us to revisit that and see can we at least get that starting salary up there. Done. So those are my 2 things right now. And again, I know it's a tight budget here and we all know that. So with that said, we start to my left. And I let your right start any question that you may have.
I already snuck mine in there on your other one. I haven't had time to look much deeper than that. And that was also from public comment. So that's,
Okay.
I'll have that to respond with. And that's,
Commissioner Taylor?
Yeah, about the same.
It may not be much now, and I'm glad we have these, so once we, our other several meetings, there'll be more questions. Commissioner Johnson?
2 things. The first one is, do we have an ETA for these, I think there are 3 outstanding salary studies. Do we have an ETA when they'll be complete?
There was a date on those, and I saw them. Can somebody tell us those dates? Andrew, can you tell us those dates? Because I did see those.
Give me a moment, yes.
Second question, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think when you said at the real-time crime center, his recommendation was to hold off on funding that until mid-year. Is that about the real-time crime center, or was it something else?
That was the 3 new positions in the fire department.
The fire
So the
department.
additional real-time crime center position would be a full fiscal year position. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And I think it's a priority too for identifying funding for this real-time crime center. I would like to know why is it here and not funded? Why wasn't it not supported early, the funding for it? Can we get that information? Do you have any context to share?
I can tell you a little bit about its rollout. So this calendar year is really the first year that it's assembled in the space in its sort of final physical form, and kind of a beta form prior to that. And so there are 2 analysts who are attached to it now. Again, I've recommended a 3rd position. You know, as you heard, police department would have sought 4 total new positions. And like any new initiative, it's one of those things that will evolve over time, I would anticipate, especially given where technology is and the number of inputs, video and audio, data and other things that are going to feed in.
So on the pay studies, the sheriff's office market assessment is due we project in June. So kind of in line with the budget. Fire and emergency services, the study that was evaluated or negotiated as part of the unique benefits agreement would be in July. And we're targeting December for the unified pay plan.
And I think that my last one, we know if the HR director reached out to another carrier about our insurance, do you know?
I know.
Okay, that's all I have to do.
He's here.
Okay, okay. Our contract is coming up, so we made the dates.
Thank you.
Mr. Copeland.
Yeah, these are more just big picture questions. So what was our budget for 2025? That was the,
And the general fund was 203 million.
how much did we, and we spent over that
We're still in it.
Still in it.
until July, I mean, until June 30th. Are we on track to spend over that?
I don't know.
Over that,
Been over.
How are we tracking?
we'd have to get back to you on
So-
how exactly we're tracking, but I don't think we're anticipating doing.
The last update I got from the finance director, who looks at revenues and expenses. Our revenues were generally on track with what was projected, almost scarily precise. Expenses, on personnel, we were generally on track. So you have some departments over, some under, but the net balance is out. At the time of the end of the report, which would have been March, we were seeing operating expenses slightly under. That's not completely atypical. If you think about it, some departments have to they'll keep some of their operating funds back to deal with any kind of emergency or unusual situations that boil up. And then if you think about like a public utilities or a TPW, they'll usually around May and June start to resupply some of their inventory of tools and equipment. And we can share that report.
So we're on target to spend about what we budgeted. Is that?
Yeah, we're not on track to go over at this point.
Okay. And then with our revenue, we're on track. So we should be flat. There's not any money left over.
I mean, I think in the last few years, there has been money left over that has traditionally come from a little more revenue and interest than we projected and a little lower amount spent on personnel because of vacancies, but we are definitely seeing those things, you know.
So for example, we've talked about the affordable housing. How much did we put towards affordable housing for this year?
Last year, you all put in
Stick
about
fund?
$5 million and largely reallocated or from fund balance.
And have we used that money?
No, sir. At the moment, that money sits within a special revenue fund available for those named uses, and staff and the attorney's office are working on standing those up so that they'll be accessible.
What page is that on there, Andrew?
The affordable housing,
No, I know that I found affordable housing, but I didn't notice this special revenue.
The affordable housing is under that special revenue.
Affordable housing's on E14, but it doesn't. So it doesn't look like that, well, maybe housing and community development hasn't used that money, or that, how you got it listed.
so a special revenue fund carries from year to year, similar to what you're familiar with on capital. So the money that you designate into those funds stays there until it is used in conjunction with whatever the commission has directed. Whereas if it was an operating fund, at the end of June, it would then reset and go into fund balance. That's not the case with these housing funds.
I guess what I'm looking at on E14, I'm probably looking at it wrong based on what you're saying. It looks like expenditure in HCD, 5.4 million, but that wasn't made. Looking
5.3 million. 5.396.
I'm on page E14.
I am too.
There's total revenues is 5.586.
Okay.
Total expenditures is listed at 5.86 for the FY25 budget.
So our assumption is, but we're gonna confirm, is that it looks like page E14, those expenditures, like it was allocated to those departments but not spent, but we will look into it and we'll confirm.
That is the budget only,
Budget only, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
what was budgeted.
For those departments, but they haven't spent.
That's, yeah, we don't show the current year expenses here.
This was budgeted, okay.
Oh, okay. I guess, okay, I'm not sure.
That's, we're putting $5 million towards something we haven't used.
Correct.
But, so do you reduce the budget by $5 million or do you keep that same 5 million there?
That 5 million stays there in that special revenue fund unless you all directed it to go somewhere else.
So is
You do not have to account for it again this year because it's carried forward.
Right, was 5.4, whatever it was that too much? Should we? I mean, if we're trying to cut costs, should we put 2.5? If we had 12 months to use 5 million, we hadn't used it.
there's no money that's in the mayor's budget for this.
Right, but I'm saying we could get 2.5 out of that.
There's 190. 190 in the budget.
I mean, obviously, we put too much in there that we're not using.
No, it's in my. No,
Go back to the note.
Hold on.
So
Go ahead.
continue.
I was just gonna say, what I hear from Andrew is that it's really more about, so we have the funding there, but what we're trying to determine in conjunction with the attorney's office is what is that legal mechanism by which we could spend it?
And that's what we're working on.
So it may be too early to determine whether or
Okay.
not it's too little or too much, but obviously that's still your call, right? But I would say right now, it hasn't been spent, not because it's too much. It's really more because we don't yet have that legal mechanism identified to spend it.
And that's one of the things that I talked about the other night with affordable housing. We've got money there that we're not spending. So it's our responsibility to figure out and educate developers on their options. So we put it there so we can use it.
Well, to Sarah's point, we can't educate the developers until we have the legal
Know
ability.
how to do it. Right. Yeah, I agree.
And so is that a question that can come back to us, an answer to where we are legally or how we can move forward legally? And then we'll know what we're doing. If Mayor Pro Tem is taking down suggestions, we'd like to check with the attorney, to see what steps to really think.
Commissioner, to answer your question more directly, I would not recommend reducing those funds until you get an answer.
No, yeah, I don't want to do that. I just, we need to figure out it's the conversation that we had today. And once we figure out the legal part of it, I think we can start releasing this money, find out the right way to release it.
The flip side of that is if I was in your position on a tighter budget, I don't know that I would contribute to it again until we start to move some of what you've committed.
That was we don't need to add to it.
Commissioner Taylor, you want to say something?
No, Andrew answered my question.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
My other question is, so we're adding 12 positions. That'll bring us to 1,808 people. How many do we have on staff right now?
I would have to confirm.
Yeah, I don't
Okay, so if we can find out,
see that.
Yeah,
and how many positions did we add last year?
I can find that out.
No, 52 is on my brain.
52 positions?
That was on my brain.
44
44 was recommended this year, and the mayor only recommended 12.
Yeah, I understand. Let's see.
I think you asked at some point this year, those vacant positions have been vacant for a long time.
Yeah.
Did we get that information yet? Did you hear that, Brad?
Commissioner Culpepper, as of April 26th, we had 1,573 positions filled, which was a 87.5% staffing rate.
15 what?
1,573, we had 225 vacant. And I am going to take this time to remind this body that we generally do not budget for a whole human. So a number of years ago, we saw this trend in vacancies, and departments have a total budget. And we look at kind of trends of what their staffing rate has been. And so, for example, if you think about some of our places that have been more chronically understaffed in the general fund, one would be landscapers. They might be authorized for 30 personnel. They might be funded for 28, 27 within their salaries, so that we don't have a ton of money left over. And then what happens is if they actually staff up higher than that, there is a little bit of administrative money that's kind of dribbled in to make the numbers work to the end of the year.
So the departments that we're adding 12 people to, are they fully staffed? I mean, my point is, why are we adding? I mean, if we need the positions, that's great, but they're not fully staffed, so why don't we can add that position, but not add an additional person?
I'd have to look, I have to pull it up because I have your answer to your last question, but I think it's because they're different positions functionally.
Right.
I've gone through that because that was one of my concerns too, John. So when I looked at, for example, IT, to add an assistant director. Now, mind, do we need an assistant director? I understand about cybersecurity is so important. I understand that. But is there a assistant director title? Because if it's assistant director, then you got to pay more because of the expertise. So my question, IT, is do you just add another employee? Because cybersecurity is so important and we want to make sure we don't have any breaches. Is assistant director, I guess what I'm saying, assistant director, the necessary position to have. But again, I don't know whether they reached out to HR, they looked at their department and said, hey, this is the position for that, or that the director say, I want an assistant director. Those type of things I look at. Other ones in the election department, because of compliance, I can see them having had because of what they did in the state. We need somebody to do compliance when it comes to election. The other position that comes to mind, I looked at that sort of caught my attention. Although I know the mayor with the building inspection of the fire department, I get that, but we have a building inspection department. Could they work in conjunction, so things like that, take a look at, but I don't know. So, I'm just saying.
We did, as the management team, look at vacancy rates with each department as they made their proposals. And quite a few departments were told, if you have a chronic vacancy situation, you need to figure out how to reallocate those to meet your needs before you ask for. The last thing I would say is, Vicki may correct me, but in my experience, around 8 to 10% vacancy is just a normal amount of turnover in an organization.
Thank you. So we're talking about splost funds from the general, are the splost operating funds for stuff, does that come out of the general budget or general fund, or does that come out of splost?
Operating.
Well, yeah, there was comments. Oh, here it is. This is on the questions that, from the Big Rocks meeting. What are the SPOS impact requests for fiscal year 2026? 129,000 central services, 495, Firefly, 73, Bethel, and so on. Does those numbers, does that hit our general budget, or does that come from, isn't there a SPOS something in SPOS that handles operating costs?
That's for program administration, so that can pay for staff like accountants and program managers. It can also pay for space or copiers. By law, it can't be used for the operations of those. The rare exception is T-SPOS allows for some operating, which is what we fund transit out of.
Okay.
The projects, when they're submitted, have a anticipated operating cost that's listed with them, so that when we're looking at them, we go like, oh, if we approve that, somewhere down the line, we're gonna have to pay for that out of the general budget. So they, like on the projects that are in now, they have operating expenses listed.
Okay, and that's where I understood. I saw that, so I thought that was included in it, but that stuff,
That's to consider, right? Like when you're building something.
And there was a lot in the request for over limits that were related to just that. And their leisure services comes to mind, that the more greenway trails we build and other things, it requires more maintenance and more of everything for each section you build. And so they come in with over limits to increase those amounts. And most of them this year, we did not recommend being funded just because the money wasn't there.
And the library's gonna be biggie, a lot more.
So yeah,
More work.
Do you want to give an update on positions?
oh yes, I'm sorry. If now's the perfect time, I have an answer to your question about positions from the last budget. So if you look at B17 in your binder, you'll see the authorized position table. So you can see year over year, B17. And so we actually had 19 positions that were added last fiscal. But that'll give you a good one-shot view of every authorized position by department.
I get vacancy from them.
And we,
That was the original ask.
I mean, our ask this year.
on the, B17, and the ones that are filled were, or can you tell, and were these long vacancies or were they open for a while?
So B17 represents our total authorized positions. So we control the number of positions that we have based on your approval, right? So this doesn't capture vacancies.
Okay.
But we could look at vacancy rate and provide some information if that's helpful.
No.
is there money from the budget that we're earmarking for the Classic Center arena bonds to pay for bond payment? That's all. And the hotel motel tax, they're getting the same amount of money, right? Just that's increased. Yeah. Good more, okay. Do we have anything in there for courthouse repairs as to what we heard the other night about just different conditions in the courthouse?
We don't. So you all approved some SPOS funds that can be used for some courthouse items, largely security-based features was a line item, and the other was some general space funds. When it comes to things like capital life cycle, there's also some of that in there. But for example, we have not accounted for carpet, which is something that's commonly requested, and we have said no to for a lack of funds and because we know the building was going to be renovated at some point. Also, if there's an enhanced level of service that's being requested, that is not in the budget at this point. And then there may be some one-time things, but depending on the scale of those, they may readily be absorbed into a central services budget, or they may be so far outside of a level of service.
I do a follow-up question. So we got these splash dollars. I know part of those splash dollars supposed to be used for building, purchasing a new judicial center. However, because we don't know what we're gonna do, could we use those splash dollars because of all the things that's going on with that particular building that are here now, to do upgrade, fix that place up the way it needs to be fixed, elevators, carpet. I'm just asking the question. Could those splash dollars, I know.
Yes.
We put them away, and I know what the voters voted for, but we got dire straits over in that courthouse, and
Yeah.
we know the other day. It's bad. So
We've approved 2 expenditures to that end in recent months, but the elevators and the HVAC that are from that SPOS fund.
okay, so again, for other things that needs to happen, could we take dollars out of there to do the things that sometimes
Yes, sir. As long as it's considered a capital upgrade, then it would be consistent with SPOS.
and maybe it's not, I'm not gonna do it, I don't wanna go in a rabbit hole with that, but maybe that's a conversation we'll have moving forward.
Is there enough SPOS dollars in that for the new building? What's the shortage?
Tens of millions.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying don't take, I was just curious what that was. I think we need to upgrade, but I was just curious where we are with it. And do we know the amount of funds, like what percentage of our budget, our revenue is federal funds?
Oh, we can get that number. The biggest line item I would anticipate would be the FTA funding for transit. There's about $2 million a year that comes through HCD for CDBG and home. The majority of that, 80% of that is then put out into the community. You're looking at about $400K a year there. And then
Burn grant,
Airport.
Justice.
a lot of the judicial side where there's a more prominent federal presence.
Airport.
Airport is largely capital.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly
Do we get federal dollars though, to Commissioner Johnson's point, do we get federal dollars?
For the airport.
We do,
Yes. I would like to know the percent of our revenues, what is federally funded.
Anything else, Commissioner Coleman?
I just want to make a comment about transit. I think we need to evaluate the fare free. I don't know what page the transit is on, but, you know, there was a SPOS to pay for that. Is that right? To pay for the fares,
T-Splost.
a T-SPOS.
For operating.
Right. I feel like we need to get away from that where, you know, people are paying to use the bus.
Commissioner, to that point, I mean, it's not gonna be in time for your discussion of this budget, but we are wrapping up the transit audit. It's just not gonna be to you till after this. So,
Anything else?
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Thornton?
There were a couple out of the quasi-governmental, representatives that spoke. I would like for us to find a way to honor, the library and public defenders increase. After working a lot with trying to do housing, biggest thing, or one of the biggest things is folks do not have the incomes. So I think that we should take every opportunity to make sure some affiliated with the government can have an opportunity. So those were the two things that I heard that I would like us to see if we could squeeze in. My next question was around, are there any more American Rescue dollars anywhere in interest somewhere? Are there any more American Rescue dollars? And I'm primarily thinking about interest. I'm not talking about what we've already given, but I know that there was interest. You know, where those dollars are, and if we could allocate for something. You don't have to answer it now. Mayor Pro Tem, I'm like everybody else, I'm probably just looking at it. Where in this big book is the utility stuff, information, the different
The enterprise fund.
enterprise.
It is in your E section. E32.
E32. Come on.
Water and sewer.
Yeah. Give me 1 minute, please.
And while we're going to help when you finish. Ask something.
And it continues on E33, just so it's clear.
Water and sewer.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Solid waste.
Okay. You go ahead and ask your question.
I just want to follow up to Commissioner Thornton on the, ARPA. So are we sweeping in the dollars that we're getting back that some of the nonprofits didn't use? Are we sweeping into that money? How we swept into that money?
Not as of now, no, sir. So it would be a commission action to recapture any of those funds.
Yes,
And so, and you would see those, I think is it quarterly that we're bringing those
Yes.
forward of any agencies that have contracts that are at risk of not expending all of those funds. And so you would have an opportunity at that point to recapture those funds.
So if we have a sweeping of it, let's see how you, those others go pretty much the same thing.
Well, it's even more complicated than that because they have to be used generally in ways that they've already been allocated.
Okay.
And so we'll go through that with those agenda reports at the time that we find non-performance. Would recommend you all doing some recovery. But we have started to kind of strategize as staff as to what could happen. And really what you're going to see is two logical solutions. One is earlier in that implementation timeline. So let's say 2026. The remainder of 25 and early into 26. You might take funds from an underperforming program and decide to supplement a high-performing program because we have some that have completed. Alternatively, if you didn't want to do that, or as we get later into that timeline where it's even harder to deploy those funds, more than likely you would look at, our recommendation to you would be to supplement capital needs as you did towards the end with, libraries and public safety vehicles and others.
Is that, that's good to know.
Okay, I think I've figured out where I'm supposed to. I was looking at like, I guess it would be E32, E33, in that area. And so these are the figures of how much each of the enterprise utility bucket, we call them, but this is this is what I've been requesting that I just have not been able to get, right?
You emailed it.
We sent it in the follow-up report for the Big Rocks questions.
Okay.
But I apologize, Commissioner, I probably should have emailed it to you directly.
No,
Sure, was it here?
no, I just want to make sure it's here.
It is, yes, ma'am.
Because this has been a mystery to me, and I guess I'll just take my time and absorb it. And I know I can call you Sarah, so there's no problem at all. And my last question was, I'm agreeing with Commissioner Culpepper. Since it's going to take much money to build a new judicial center, I think that we should come to grips with using whatever the mechanism is, that's lost monies to rehab the courthouse. It is an embarrassment. It's not good for older people, I think. So I do think that we could, I don't know if it happens in this budget. And my next question, can we get some information on how other governments or other government entities, maybe even the school district, how there's, what would you call them? I guess SPLOS, T-SPLOS staff, in-house staff, dollar-wise compares to us having contracting out. I would like to know what that difference would be. And, I think those are my questions. Thank you.
If I can, it's probably a good time to speak to ARPA interest. Because I know this has come up a few times. ARPA interest by federal regulation is not used or under the same oversight as the original ARPA funds. And so since its inception, the interest generated from ARPA has been placed in the general fund, which is one of the reasons why you all have seen healthier fund balances and higher interest than expected. So when you hear a number about a net position or a fund balance within the general fund, or as you look to this budget and you see interest as one of those line items of revenue, a portion of that is ARPA. And in the Big Rocks follow-up, I believe we broke it out to a dollar amount for it.
And that was what I was, and I'll go back,
I have it pulled up.
okay, but that is what I was talking about. I wanted, actually, I asked for it in the last budget. And it didn't show up in the last, it showed up on a separate page, but it did not show up like all the other items. So I just need to see it separate, if that's okay. And I'm assuming that those interest dollars are being calculated in this year's budget some kind of way. We just don't know. I just don't know what that dollar amount is.
It would be captured as revenue.
Okay.
And just because I have it pulled up, for FY 25 year to date through February, which is when we were pulling together some of these responses, there was $850,427 of interest revenues from ARPA that have been
Is that
received.
in the other revenues row?
I believe so. Yes, I'm getting a yes.
In order to do that, it's, the law states that it must be the specific circumstances and regulations. Can we get a list of that 850,000 and the regulation in which it was allowed to do so, is transferred to the general fund? Yeah, thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Hamby?
Okay. Just got a few questions or requests for information. One is, I know each year we usually get a list of all the department requests that were made. If we could do that again this year, just so we can see that what was made or what was actually funded. And I have a question also about how we're doing we've always done it this way, but I just need some recollection on my memory. So if you're looking at the capital by department, for example, on page 26, the dog 26. Am I reading this correctly? That it'd be similar to the same when you have special revenues funds, Andrew. How much actual money is in the fleet replacement program? I think we budgeted 10 million in FY 24. I'm sure we used some. See where I'm going? What's the fund balance of some of these? I mean, none of them really have fund balance associated with them, but I know some money's there. Unless I'm looking at it, unless they're on a different page that I'm not looking. You see where I'm going?
Sure, so, on E26, it shows that there was about $10.8 million. What I would caution is that, in the way that that's accounted for, they roll up open purchase orders at the end of the year. And coming really right around FY 22 until more or less about 6 months ago, we were having major issues getting vehicles to the millions of dollars. So I think what I'd like to answer is we'll get back to you with a more accurate reflection of what the fund balance is.
You just see how I'm trying to read that, for
Yes.
not only this one, but for the other. I hate for y'all to have to go through all this, but it just seems like if, for example, if the mayor's recommended 15,000 on the next page for replace internal support equipment, and there's still $149,000 in there. Y'all see where I'm going with this? I know we'll use the money eventually, but if things are tight. Am I making any, I don't know, I guess I'm rambling.
And so a little context, because I think I know where you're going, or picking up what you put down. Every year, the manager's office has to approve capital carry forward. So departments have capital accounts, and they might be set aside for space renovation or a sewer project or whatever. And each account requires approval from the manager's office to carry into the next year. And if it's not approved to carry forward, then it returns to the fund balance of whatever fund it's sourced from. I can pull you the number, but I want to say in last year, our carry forward was around $20 million.
For all the capital projects?
For all the general fund capital projects, which is one of the reasons why this year's capital budget was leaner and uncomfortably lean, quite honestly, was the direction that is conveyed to departments is before you go getting investments from a budget with some scarcity in it, you need to spend down what we got.
Is there a page that reflects where that carry forward balance is, capital projects? If you don't have it right now, then maybe get that information. That just kind of be helpful, I think. Second question I had was regarding parking on street and in residential areas. It probably pertains to more so to Commissioner Lee, right, and myself. But really the whole community, if somebody's parking in a handicap spot and gets a ticket. I mean, I guess I want to know how much in this year. I remember last year, we had about almost $1 million in revenue or in fines outstanding that weren't paid or collected. And we, I think, allocated budget last year for a person over in the municipal court to help with that. So I'd like again to know this year how much in fines are not collected. Because I'm just giving, you know, on some streets there in 5 Points, you'll drive by and see somebody with a ticket on their car, drive back by again a few minutes later, that ticket's on the ground, that they're not really taken seriously. So, it's a big issue in my district as far as making sure that for giving a ticket, it needs to be enforced. And, my final thing for now is, now look, or may have some more questions, Mayor Pro Tem and Andrew Bradley. I just draw everybody's attention to the schedule of fee charges.
What page?
Oh goodness, they start on. Oh, let's go, start on page, start on page F20. I bring it to your attention because of this, I mean, you know, certainly the water fees are going up, but also it looks like in here, once we vote on this budget, that the garbage collection fees are gonna go up. And when we start having all these fees go up on somebody's bill that they get in the mail, then that's gonna generate some conversation.
Where does it show the, like, I'm just looking on F20. It says replanting and neuter spray dog, you know, and it just gives the price, if the price is there, does it somewhere show the change?
If there is a change, it's the next column over.
Okay, but looking at, okay, that's it, got it, 121, I see exactly.
So for
Airship mooring fee is going up quite a bit.
So for example, in F35, you have schedule fee changes for solid waste.
Where?
35. 20 gallon cans are gonna go from 22 to 28.
Oh,
And again, downtown residential services, I know bags are no longer required for residential services. They must use the eco stations, which I have to say, the eco stations haven't, the rollout hasn't been, no pun intended, hasn't been as smooth as I was hoping that it would be. I tried to use the code the other day myself and the door wouldn't open. So I say all that to say is, you know, at some point and I remember the eco station discussion that, you know, we were supposed to kind of move in one direction for how we service downtown for trash collection and to avoid having the roll carts out and the trash being put out. So, you're right. There's probably, you know, just throw that out there for, as a tangent, which I was complaining about earlier. Discussion about. But the fees, I think everybody should take a look at those fees and make sure that y'all know. Folks that y'all represent are gonna be okay with this.
is there a fee for, special events downtown?
There is, but that hasn't changed.
Okay.
Doesn't look like it's changed.
Hey, can I have a question while you're on that?
Gentlemen, come back.
Come on.
Just one comment based on, we had to do a budget amendment the other night for animal services. And they're not proposing any fee increases. We probably ought to look at, and it seems like it's been something they've had to have a budget amendment multiple times a year, several years in a row. We probably ought to look at increasing those fees.
They have some minimal increases, but I fully agree with you, sir. And I think the challenge that they're facing, because I asked the same question in budget meeting, is that it's kind of like a lever in a way, because the more we increase fees, the less prone people are to actually adopt because they can't afford it. And so it's one of those things where the department struggles with trying to find what's that sweet spot to cover costs while also not disincentivizing you guys.
Well, we also need to look at, because I'll have to go back and look at last year's budget. I don't know if I can't remember if we raised the roll cart fees last year or not.
I would have to confirm, but I don't think we did.
Yeah, I don't know if we did or not. So, and that matters, I mean, you haven't done it in 2 years and
And the registration of a potentially dangerous dog.
Those are the kind of fees.
I'm sorry, one more question. Where would I find like fines for court fees?
I will. I'll have our budget staff look for it. I do have your answer to your capital carry forward, but I'll let them look for that.
Okay, I guess I'm just wondering, with those court fees, I'm assuming we're limited by state
State.
issues on it, but are we at?
Those aren't in the budget because I don't think they're set by us. So it's not something
That we can change?
that we can change.
That's for them.
Let me ask y'all a question. Just want to get a consensus. We've been asking the staff a lot of questions. They're giving us the answer. Would you all prefer, ask them the question, that they email us all this so everybody can have it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, definitely.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Coach.
I want to kick back on, I know the fees are state issue, but is there a number of fees that have not been paid or we're not paying that? Can we find that out?
Mostly it's parking outside of downtown. I mean, downtown, you'll get food if you don't pay your parking ticket, then you go to court, but there's no mechanism to do that. If you're parked on a parking permit street, you'll occur.
Okay, were you asking examples of the tickets that aren't being?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the residential parking pass, that one's a $50 one. I don't know if that's part of it, or another one in my area is the yellow line, parking on the yellow curb.
That may or may not have been paid.
I'm wondering, it seems like that, I had to go to court. Oh, look. 3 days into the year, they were out there ticketed.
Okay, but that was my question.
And I think that was a question that I asked, but they'll tell us how much fines are outstanding.
Yeah, that's the word.
That's it, Mayor. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Davenport.
Right. I'm sorry. Only actually, that's in city. I'll be right here. Yes. But anyway, central services. Last year we added a little crew and we added, I guess, a budget for, contracting outside for mowing. I didn't see that captured. How much money did we spend on that little crew? And how much did we spend on contracting out for, mowing?
So I'll pull that for you. The mowing was $96,000 was allocated in FY '25, and staff have implemented contracts now for supplemental rural mowing. So what happens is we still run our main crew, and then we have these contractors hotspot. There was also, so last year was not the litter crew. The litter crew was 2 years prior. Last year, though, you all did implement a paint crew at the request of Central Services that was one full-time ACC Gov staff member, I believe 2 or 3 paid participants from the diversion center. That is fully operational, and if you give me a second, I'll pull that number for you and what the investment was.
Alrighty, and I'm assuming in May we'll get a report from HCD about the CDBG funding, when it's there with the funds potentially they're going to get, correct?
Yes, sir. So we are still eagerly awaiting guidance from our friends at the feds.
Sorry.
And as soon as we have that, we will share it with you.
So, I didn't know some of our nonprofit agencies are having some issues with federal funding now. One of our biggest ones is, for the food bank. And I would like to allocate 50,000 to them. And they're seeing a reduction in their, federal funding, and their needs have increased. Price of groceries going up, and for it, one of the things people are suffering with is affordability of food. So, I just wanna plug that in for my colleagues. But one of the things that taxpayers like to see is, clean streets and stuff. So, I was just wondering how much are we spending on the outside service for the contracting? And what is agree with funding of the library and the public defenders, and the tipping fees for solid waste, it just went up $5. Hate to be that guy.
Raised it quite a bit, that's fine.
So one of the problems that a lot of outside services, outside companies or not, Oconee, Oglethorpe County or Clarke County, use our landfill because it's cheaper illegally. Because our rates are lower than our surrounding counties. So I would like for that to go up to, that's a discussion that we all need to have. I'd like for that to go up to match our surrounding neighbors, so people will stop, I've said, it's not a legal document, but people are taking advantage of paying that lower tipping fee at our landfill. And
Didn't we try to solve that with the,
we were very conservative too.
no, I thought it was when, addressing the, haulers. I was able to solve with that, and I'm not sure that there's a way to do it. What I understand and what we studied in Forest, it was not able to really decipher whose trash was in the truck, since because the haulers weren't specific to us. They could have been us. They also could have been somebody else at the same time, but as long as they're one of ours, I got the impression there's no way to tell.
Yeah.
But, is that amount before you?
I don't have it.
Solid waste. It's,
Not in front of me.
It looks like there is an increase on F-36.
A good point to make as well is that asking about what we put in last year's budget. I know we had a list of with a CDO. It'd be really good to have a look at that list and tell us what, because I know the bulky waste items part of that and just where we are in that.
I believe a lot of that is lack of drivers, CDL.
Well, if that's the case, and we need.
I think
know,
we've got the truck without,
We need to know.
the truck without the driver. I think might be part of it.
Commissioner Davenport, you asked about the cost of the paint crew that was put in. 241,000 was added last year, and that crew's fully operational.
Okay.
See stuff like that.
Say that what I say. Listen to emails that everybody had.
Just little minor things about, our street signs. I know last year they were struggling to, I don't say struggling, but they felt underfunded when, you notice like road signs that says like Morton Road, some of them may be dirty or damaged. And when you email or do a request, we don't have the funds. Now, I have not gotten to that budget yet, but, for me, my main thing is the little things that make Athens look better, pleasing, like our landscaping, our, beautification, our parks, leisure services, the award-winning leisure services are doing, making sure that their maintenance and, the parks and trails are well maintained, and of course, our police department and making sure that the real-time crime center is fully funded. But those are for right now, my only requests or my only questions. But I do have a question about the fire department. So it is, with the agreement that we had with the union, it's an additional every year $200,000. Did I read that right?
I'm not aware. There's an agenda item coming to you in your June cycle, based on the, negotiations, and that's going to be at an amount for this year of capital, I believe it is, for 45,000
45.
for the asset.
What was this?
So everybody, we do.
For the firefight, the union negotiation.
Yeah, that was, but I thought it was 200, but it's 45. That's their ask.
This year.
This year.
And y'all will need to add that into the budget if you adopt that CB, accept the CBA.
What is that for?
For mattresses and
Additional
computers.
computers,
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's 40,000.
40,000? Okay.
If you.
Capital.
And, this is gonna be a hard ask. So the housing, the HCD, when it comes to the, affordable housing, I think we had an agreement that we do 5 million a year. I didn't see that in the budget to add to that fund.
There's no additional money for that fund. Obviously, as you've heard,
Yeah.
the mechanism for that just hasn't been built yet.
I got a question.
And then, can I send y'all a list of some programs and that I would like to cut?
All of us, send them all.
Okay.
Anything else, Commissioner Davenport?
That's it.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I mean, I present this every year. I would like for us to find additional revenue sources. I would like for us to supplement that affordable housing fund. I mean, I know that $5 million is sitting there, but when it comes time for us to possibly buy a new property or renovate a property to create this affordable housing, we're gonna need a hell of a lot more than $5 million. So I feel like we really should be adding to that fund every year, whatever amount we can. I'd love to see us put $1 million in it this year. You know, the presentation we had yesterday got my wheels spinning about the impacts on our, what is actually causing our housing affordability crisis. And it was presented that we could assess Airbnbs as commercial properties and increase our revenue. Maybe we could put fees on those. I mean, they're commercial entities. I know it's probably not, it's not like we can put that in action right now, but I would like to, for us to seriously pursue that. We have a program, so next year we can start raking in those revenues that divert to our affordable housing crisis. I'm looking at, you know, possibly increasing some fees in some places in animal services and solid waste. I know we're looking at those, some of those fees going up in solid waste, but I mean, I was really, really moved by the ride around I did a couple of years ago. And I think about it all the time, and the challenges our haulers face with people who are basically violating ordinances, what they put in their trash or how they put their hands out. I feel like we should be issuing citations and bringing in revenues for people who are violating basic policy and ordinances in what they put in their trash, what they put in their recycling bin, where they put their bins. You know, we've got a very transient and a very wealthy transient community. Maybe if, you know, some of these folks got cited a couple times, they might start behaving properly, and it would really make our haulers' lives easier and probably save the department money, but also increase revenue stream. Real-time crime center. I am not interested in increasing funding to that at all until we have University of Georgia as paying a public safety fee. We are adding 4 fire positions, which are long overdue. I understand the fire marshal's office could probably use some additional positions. And you know, that kind of fee apply to that department as well. There seems to be an interest among some segments of the community that, we need to increase our policing. But the statistics say that our crime level is actually pretty low and when it comes to comparable communities. So I don't believe we need to massively increase that investment. The mayor has, presented an incremental investment, so we can start to level up, but this is a lean year with other needs. I look at the hotel motel and the presentation we got last week. Classic Center, it appears that our hotel motel revenue collection is up, 10 or 11%. I'd like to see that be distributed equitably, not just to the Classic Center, but to the CEP fund. I'd like to see them at least get that extra 10%. So there is some equity in how we spend those funds. I'm hearing from my constituents and constituents from all over my district, that the arena and the events at the Classic Center are not necessarily accessible to them, either as a patron or as a nonprofit who might want to throw an event there. So I feel at the very least, we need to supplement the special events that do make that kind of, those kind of community building activities accessible to regular folks in the community and the general public. Think that's it. I want to see us find some additional revenue sources and hopefully clamp down on some of the violations that are real problems in our community.
Yeah, just forgot one thing, and it's for my colleagues. We do, once we get our tax digest and, the finance department, do their magic, can we save money? And one of my biggest things that I'm really concerned and passionate about is making sure our employees get paid, and that will be due, as staff has said, we'll get that report in December. So that will carry over to next year's balance or next year's budget, but, I would just like for us to be cognizant of that. I'm assuming if we get once we get that settled and we do a market rate or above market pay for our employees, it may be a $9 or $10 million budget hit. So, just want to throw that out there.
Okay. Building on a couple of things that heard all the time. On the real-time crime center, can you guys send out sort of, don't we have some old information on like an overview of what the Real Crime Center does? Likewise on that, I had already down here, can you give us from the police department or wherever some stats on crime? I think they probably have it available, but longitudinally over the last couple of years so that we know that we actually see what's going on there. In terms of the budget amendments passed last year, we were talking last night about all that money for the animal services and such. And are there any other, can you give us, I feel like I'm adding on to this, but what other significant budget amendments that we made this year? Probably the courthouse, and others, so that we can make sure that we address those in there in the budget. Is there a contingency fund line in where is that?
So there's one both in general fund and.
Do those have page numbers?
Are they listed? We'll find out.
Okay, that's good. Likewise with the, when we're talking about the tipping fees, it looks to me like there is an increase this year, maybe we've discussed this already. I mean, I know it's hard to tell sometimes with companies telling us the wrong thing perhaps, but I don't understand why we don't have an out-of-county tipping fee. And we have out-of-county leisure service fees. So that's a smaller thing. I would like us to get the $37,000 for the library and the $8,000 for the public defender. Is that special events? What's the fund that you just had? What is the fund? Is the fund that helps the festivals downtown?
Community events.
CEP.
Yes, CEP.
And that's down at
240,000.
What page is that on?
Under hotel motel.
Okay, because I saw it a little lower here. So And that's not an increase this year from.
Right, from last
Right, but yet the hotel motel is going up, so I wanna look at that to see, you know, if we're upping the money for the Classic Center and the Visitor Center, that we need to be upping that one as well. We have a lot of festivals downtown that bring a lot of people in here at low cost to us all. And then, so that's something I'm concerned about addressing. I also want to look back at the, you know, the cardiac monitors with the fire department. If I'm looking at the CDO from last year, it says, last year we put in 100,000 and it says for 300,000 total, first installment of 300K each year. So I haven't looked in there in the fire department to see if that's in there or not. But I want to make sure that we're following through. And speaking of that, perhaps to bump them up to the top of our emails, could someone pull together the CDOs that have been submitted?
Yeah.
Budgets the last several years, maybe 4 from my year, you know, 4 years.
I made that recommendation, Mr. Martin, that all the CDOs that we did last year.
And finally, I really think it's important that we put some money into affordable housing. I heard what Commissioner Culpepper was saying about the money that's in that fund. I too, you know, talked to the food bank today. I know other people are going over there. There's 18% food insecurity in this community, which tells me that there's probably a very similar thing with housing insecurity. That's 23,400 people. You know, what's impressive with the food bank, which it'd be nice to give them, it might be good to give them a little bit of money as well, is that you get a lot of meals for, you know, 20,000, 30,000. Unfortunately, with housing, you don't get a lot of houses with 30,000, 40,000 or 5 million, you know, if you start a real program. So I think it's important that we put some money in there. Even, you know, the mayor has referred to another revenue stream. But I think we've talked about it so much that we need to put something in there to show our commitment to that. Because it's not going to get cheaper. So whether it's a mixture of some found interest in ARPA funds, if the tax digest goes up, you know people don't like this, but I'd be willing to put a 0.01 or millage rate to fund even, you know, $2 million to put in there or something or other, some very small amount to get that, because it's the need, the amount of money needed is very large to address this. And it's not as if next year is going to be like, oh, it's going to be like, you know, we're going to have so much more money next year. I don't think that's going to happen.
Sure.
So that's mine.
Commissioner Myers, we'll send this to you in the follow-up report, but for the sake of people that are watching, on our website under the police, there's a section for transparency that includes some links to some actively updating crime.
Right. Yeah, I'm aware that there's, thank you, just to send that out to all of us. And does that show it, you know, longitudinal, I mean, over time, right?
Because, no, well, the main dashboard shows year over year, but we do have more in-depth information we can share.
Yeah, and I just bring that up because the Real-Time Crime Center obviously has gotten a lot of community attention and such. But if we look at the number of people who are food insecure, housing insecure, and homeless, there's a lot of people who are not safe in those areas. And I think that it's just as important to address them.
That's how you prevent crime.
Okay.
So we'll do another go around.
Okay.
So Commissioner Thornton, I come back to you.
So we're all gonna go back around again?
Just, so your hand first.
No, I was just gonna comment, and I thought that was the end, but, I go ahead and take the opportunity. I think it's really important, that we find out how we spend the money, how we can spend the money for housing. I did not know there was a legal, I guess I just didn't pay attention to that part. I think if we unlock that legal glitch, whatever it is, adding more money to that housing pot makes sense. So I definitely support, I support
Yeah.
more money. And I think at the same time, we really got to figure out why we can't come up with a plan to get the money to do what it's.
Right, so hopefully, as soon as we start that new year, we'll have that really in-depth.
Well, I think, again, I think we sat on this and I don't know why. And I ain't gonna say we sat on it, it just got by us. But I do know that there are people in this community who are very interested, they want to get involved. But we're sitting on 5 million and they're like, what the heck? So I guess I still would like my original question, or our question, how do we get to the place where we can unleash that money and bring money? Well, it's embarrassing when you say you have $5 million and you got folks who can't afford it. We have about, what is it? Patrick Davenport. I think you alluded to it. What, the group of folk that are being evicted off of Lexington Road.
Like 17 units?
Those 17, those folk are gonna be home. That person who purchased that property had already purchased property from us. But he also went and purchased that property. Their rent went from $400 to $900 as of June the 1st. They went to court May the 1st. They gotta be out now by June. So we gotta figure out how we can use that money. That's 17 households. There hasn't been no real crime over there, very quiet little neighborhood. You don't even know they're back there. But this is a moneymaker, and we gotta make sure that it's just not a moneymaker for developers also. So that's my.
Right.
This is not a budget question, but, we have a Lexington Road and Atlanta Highway, $4 million bucket. And there's some needs for like infrastructure and storm drainage fixing and all that stuff. Have we expended all those funds for the Lexington Road and Atlanta Highway? $4 million
It's
bucket?
a budget question. That's good.
If not,
I'll take it.
can we?
T-Splosh bucket?
It was an old T-Splosh, I believe.
Right now.
We'll look into it.
Mr. Wright,
This is related to the agenda item on hold, the land bank agenda item. Is that not the mechanism that helps with the strike fund, parameters?
It's
Is that part of it?
It's wrong, but it's not the process. You told me it really opened up the farmer, but it's not the step-by-step that you need, right?
when you say step, what you mean step, you say step by step.
It is one million.
That's what I'm saying. It's not a plan.
It's one of the.
Currently have an agreement with First American Bank now.
Yeah.
I would think 2 applicants have applied.
And that's my point exactly, but I don't.
Let me get John Tiffany, I'll come in.
Mine's easy. Just can we get a breakdown of what the amount of money that's generated in the hotel motel tax and where it goes? How much goes to the Classic Center? How much goes to,
E8,
all the different funds, where it all goes?
E8. Is the page.
Yeah.
Yep. There's 93,000 available.
D8, did you say D8?
E is in egg. Eight is in Ocho.
Even eat dinner.
Commissioner Taylor.
Yeah, last year when me and Mike talked about the $5 million coming out for the strike fund, it was with the understanding, former manager Williams, and I had a meeting and he kind of was like, advising, if you set aside a certain amount for affordable housing, a potential model to be using the land that we own, which is why we went down that road of, while we went down that road of, ACC on land. And because it's just like slivers of land. Nikki also said that, because it cuts out the cost of land, therefore making it doable for the X amount of dollars for affordable housing and so I say all of that to say, I would like to see some funds go into the affordable, the strike fund as well, but because I know that we are running on a deficit next year, if we were to look back at the budget to increase it by 1.5, maybe we'll have some land that's available to approach to be able to build something on. Who knows? Maybe we can talk to housing authority.
Should just,
We get the year-to-date expenditures for the departments for March and April. Year-to-date expenditure report, the munis report. The computer-generated munis report for March and April for departments. The second thing I have is, I'm just curious about the $5 million set aside in the special revenue fund and removed from the general fund. So I understand that, but I'm not sure I understand the why that amount without knowing how it would be used. So I hear the legal mechanism, and I have some examples of legal mechanisms besides the Land Bank Authority, because I did meet with the attorney and he didn't think that was a mechanism, a legal mechanism that was worthwhile or valid. So what are some other legal mechanisms?
So one of what staff is currently working on from HCD and the attorney's office is on setting up a housing trust fund, which is a model that's used in other communities. And you have to structure that in such a way that you navigate the dreaded gratuities clause. This all comes down to gratuities.
Gratuities.
It's still based on the land that we own or no?
No, ma'am.
Right, okay. Not based on the land. So can you tell me why that $5 million, that figure amount, why that was selected?
Oh, I did.
yeah, somebody talking strike.
Yeah, that was just.
So you talking about strike? Yeah. So
It's affected our fund balance, so I'm just curious where that figure.
it came up because we was under pressure and the legal ramification that we was gonna start looking at renovations, purchasing land, working with other nonprofits to build houses. And so we thought with $5 million, because I think, if y'all correct me if I'm wrong, when we was looking, we did a study saying they have a really decent housing market, or do something with housing, need close to $10 million.
So could we sell the land that we don't, can we just sell the land that we have that's not buildable, or?
It can be the option.
So we could buy land that's buildable?
Yeah.
Isn't it a circuitous way to still manipulate the security clause though?
I don't understand well, I ain't a lawyer, so I don't know. I'm
You know what
not,
I'm saying? Like, it's still, like, you're buying land to actually get into the program, but it's still essentially the same thing as.
the land's for sale.
Gratuities.
Do you have a sense of when that report will be delivered to the commission?
So as far as something like the housing trust fund to move dollars, it will probably be approximately another 9 months for that to be fully launched. Now, there would be checkpoints along the way with the commission for you all to understand what the options are before you and authorize. If you're specific to land, if you want to be able to navigate land, you need to, the way to navigate around the gratuities clause is to work through an authority. And so we have some existing authorities. The Downtown Development Authority is one-ish, but they have a limited footprint. And so that is one of the reasons why GOC has recommended some deeper work happen with the Land Bank Authority. Because for example, let's actually look at a property that you all have authorized for disposition, the old Cooperative Extension facility in West Broad.
Yes.
Worth a few $100,000
It's been
probably.
voted to be surplus already.
It has been approved for surplus.
But is it zoned for residential? or
It's actually zoned for commercial.
Housing, so that would be an excellent option.
So there's really two options. Well, there's one option generally that exists right now, which is you sell it and you sell it to the highest bidder and you get a yes, no. So you don't get to say whether or not you like that bidder. If they come in and they're a student housing developer or just generally aren't aligned with the values of our community, all you get to say is yes, no. You can trade it. for land of equal or higher value, but that doesn't actually get it off your books. However, if you put it in something like a land bank authority or maybe a development authority, they can then target specific areas. So for a development authority, they might use it for a specific type of business recruitment and development. With a land bank authority, what we see in other communities is that they might work in partnership with a nonprofit developer and they're thereby making the land cheaper. Or they might sell it and then use those funds to buy, say, single-family lots in gentrifying areas of town and protect them so that they're available for affordable housing. So in the simplest thing to tell you is an authority, regardless of which one you use, is far more nimble than the unified government. And that's not because of the way we're structured, it's because of the way state law applies.
No, I do understand. It just seems like I wish we had the particulars worked out before we transferred the funding. Somebody wants,
No, I have it because I brought up the CDO from last year that had more specifics in it, because I think the mayor had $1 million, and then we supplemented with 4 million. But it was supposed to, it'll come out in that thing they send out to you. But utilizing the 4 million allocated herein, along with 1 million allocated in the mayor's budget for a strike fund, for the total of these funds to be allocated as follows: following gap financing fund for LICA projects, 2 million single family affordable housing fund, 2 million acquisition strike fund, 1 million. So we put that in there. But I would say that those are all based on the recommendations that were in the affordable housing investment strategy report. We were working off of that's what we were working. So, I know for these are just big, how much money did we put into the North Downtown? It was 40 million. Almost $40 million. So these are very large sums of money that are needed to help with, with housing. But there are specifics in here, and they all came out of that strategic investment for affordable housing study. But that's all in these great notes that put in your list.
I know you requested the housing data. Did you receive the housing data? And for the last 5 years, you had requested housing data.
I think I got it.
I'm just curious if we're building houses. With the data, with
What I asked the other night, you told me when I got
it was about a month ago, you had asked for,
You're right.
5 years worth of,
Housing.
outcomes data that showed, the results of our housing and community development department to administer the program of building affordable homes. So I was just curious if you received it. It would fold into how this money would effectively be utilized.
Well, she's taking notes.
Commissioner Wright.
Well, now that Andrew's talking about the property and the surplus one, because we had talked about what it would take to get a real estate agent to help us move property. And I think you've shared with me that the example you just gave of how that's a better way to do it. But if it's a property like that we're ready to surplus, and I'm not convinced we should be in the housing business in that form of developing it. But if we sold it under some of those examples you just gave to Stephanie's inquiry, but we could designate the money we get from that property goes into the strike fund.
Yeah.
And then once the strike fund gets its parameters to go out, we're still adding to, just like Carol's example of what we put in there. Is that correct?
You would have that option, yes.
And if we're talking about revenue, Dexter and I, we talked about, and that's the bad part about some of this stuff. You talk about it and then you don't think about it no more because something else takes its place. But impact fees is something that I think we need to look at. I don't know. I know it won't hit this budget, but it is surely something that we can be planning for next year, the correct wording, especially on a lot of the student housing and stuff, whatever that legal word is, impact fees might be. I think, we need to start early talking about revenue instead, and so when we get to the expenditures part, it's not such a bitter. So I guess it's selling our property, some of our property, get a realtor to do that, impact fee, but we need to, bring in ideas on how we can bring in revenue.
I think the state of Georgia limit us pretty strictly on how we use impact fees. Like, don't they have to be applied to infrastructure that directly impacts the property that the fees are
I don't
derived
know.
from? We got a memo like 8
But-
years ago.
Probably pull something up that Bill Barry.
Yeah.
And I do think, again, when you talk about limitations, every time there's a limitation, there's a way to work with it, but you gotta figure it out. And if there's a way, if we had an impact fee legally, maybe we'd be getting money from, what is the Rambler downtown now? We'd be getting money from the Rambler besides, property taxes. So if you're talking about ways, there are ways. I send Dexter everything I catch on that I see other counties are doing. And everybody, gets information. We just need to share it and follow up.
Commissioner, just to Commissioner Culpepper's question earlier about bus fares. Although I agree it's a good discussion, looking at the recent contract we had signed about a year ago with UGA. The division of those federal funds actually stipulates that we remain fare-free through the end of that contract, which is 26. So you'd have to almost renegotiate the contract with UGA in order to back to.
And a little bit further on that, it's going to be in the department's work plan to assess fares and bring back options for you all to consider. And at this point, because we spent so long being fare-free, it is not a matter of flipping a switch. So we don't have the equipment and even the financial infrastructure in place to be able to take fares. And ultimately, if you look at the types of transit systems that are taking fares today, they use a lot of electronic payments from phones and third-party processing. And we had none of that at the point we left. So if we're going to re-enter the fare space, if that's something you all decide to do, transit staff would recommend that we do that, systematically and with those improvements in mind.
That was one of my follow-up questions to email was, what is that timeline? If it's a 5-year plan to implement, we would just a summary of what of the cost, because I remember it being pretty archaic, kind of like our meters downtown, but moving to the more advanced version is a cost, and then the time to phase it in. But it seems almost like you couldn't phase it in. We are or we aren't.
And when I say phase it in, I really mean whether or not you want to go completely back to the full fares that you left and even adjusted for inflation, or if you want it to be incremental about what the.
Yeah, but as far as the capital investment, it's all there. And then how long that would take. And then like you say, it could only start, we could plan to start it, but it wouldn't start. It sounds like it couldn't happen before that contract anyway.
Can we have this discussion at a retreat to get back to the budget?
Oh, wait, one comment about that. Just, we ought to think about that as a T-Plus project, funding for that.
Yeah.
That's coming back up. Yep.
One more thing, and then it's been 2 hours, and again, I don't want to mimic anybody, but it was 2 hours. I want to close us out with something, and then go ahead.
I would like to know, you see, I was ready to go, I'm talking about close up, now I got a question. I would like to know, how much we are paying for, outside counsel. And I would also like to know who they are and how they're selected too, so. Who they are, how much we're paying them, and, how they're selected.
So, close us out. If y'all gonna send any questions to the staff, everybody, so we have what the questions are.
Okay, question. To Sarah George or to everybody?
Or see,
Say to me, I'll get them to Sarah, but I would always, anything you send to Andrew or I, always at a minimum cop up there. At a minimum. Yeah.
Can we start like a budget, like,
Just somebody start one.
let someone start thread so that we're not asking the same questions, you know, so that we know what other questions were asked? That would be
Budget
helpful.
thread.
Yeah, budget questions thread and then add on to that.
I'll get with Brad and we'll talk about it.
Maybe.
Because that way it's all in one thread instead of jumping around.
So we got next Tuesday. We got the work session. Again, thank y'all. Appreciate it. Any questions that you got, let us know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.